Hello, and welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the creative team behind Between the World and Me. We'd like to thank our friends at HBO for making this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Angelique Jackson. Angelique is a film and media reporter for Variety based in Los Angeles. Prior to joining Variety, she worked as a producer for Entertainment Tonight, winning 3 Daytime Emmy Awards for her work. She is a graduate of Grady College of Journalism at the University of Georgia. Welcome, Angelique. Welcome, panelists. And please, Angelique, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Yes, I am Angelique Jackson, film and media reporter at Variety, and I'm so thrilled to be having this conversation with the creative team behind HBO's Between the World and Me. And joining me are director and executive producer Kamilah Forbes. Hi. Producer Alisa Payne. Hello.
Hello.
And executive producer and performer Susan Kelechi Watson. Hello.
Hey.
Hi. Well, thank you guys so much for having this talk. This is realistically, it's kind of perfect to be discussing this work because that is the purpose of the work. The purpose of this film was to create and to continue conversation from, of course, Ta-Nehisi Coates' integral book, Between the World and Me. So Kamilah, I'm actually gonna start with you. You've previously brought this book to the stage before bringing this book to the screen. So tell me, what was the biggest difference between the two experiences?
I think when any adaptation, you always think about the form. And so, the one thing about the theater is that it is all about sort of the energy and the visual aesthetic that you're creating for a collective of people. So live music was a big part of it, right? The celebration of the language was a big part of I think, the adaptation to the theater. But when we started to think about the adaptation for film, what becomes even that much more important is the intimacy that film can bring. The visual aesthetic in a 2-dimensional versus a 3-dimensional space. And with film, there were other tools like we can use, like the tools of animation, the tools of archival video, archival footage. So, you really start to starting thinking about, okay, what are the tools that we have at hand and where do we want to lean in? So, really wanted to lean into this idea of celebrating, but also leaning into the intimacy and humanity of just people, and really being able to showcase empathy. Empathy through his language, empathy through the storytelling as well. So, that was sort of, I would say, sort of the biggest difference was style and form.
I love that you mentioned intimacy because we'll get into that a little bit, but I feel like in having to produce this remotely and producing this mid-pandemic, there's even more of an intimacy of just being in people's homes as they are filming these monologues. But Susan, let me ask you next, in bringing this work to the screen, what was it that was most important and impactful to you in having a screen adaptation?
I think it was accessibility. It was being able to get it to masses of people. It felt like, people were already so attached to the book, and so many people were now coming back to the book because, we did it at a time where there was a definite call to action in terms of what was happening in terms of the racial dynamic in this country and the upheaval that was happening. And there was this call, that we felt a need to respond to. And it was happening in such a way. What happened with George Floyd had this ripple effect across the world. And so it felt like we had to take this beautiful piece that was, initially on a stage and find a way to follow this ripple effect, right? To follow the vibrations out into the world. And so we thought that streaming it would be the best way. We thought that, bringing it to people's screens would be another way to make it accessible, give us the conversation that we needed. And also the way that Ta-Nehisi expressed what he did after Eric Garner's death in 2015, seemed, when this book came out in 2015, it seems, you know, exactly relevant to what was happening now, starting with the same words, I can't breathe, and all of this. So, you know, it was, I know that, and I feel, you know, sure in speaking for Kamilah and Alisa, that, you know, we felt like there's something to say. And then you look at somebody like Ta-Nehisi who said it. And so it's like, all right, well, then what can we add to that to kind of complete that sort of full artistic journey for the piece? And, you know, more from book into theater into, you know, film, which is just an incredible journey. But it's because of the truth and the resonance of the truth in the book that it was able to translate as it did.
And of course, taking it beyond film too, to the podcast conversations. So it just, because unfortunately in life, the conversation continues, the conversation around the work also must continue as well. Alisa, how did you see it?
I echo everything that the women said. I think a big part of making this was also making sure that the people who are making it behind the scenes were people who looked like us. And that was so important to everyone across the board. We wanted to make sure that what we were putting on was so crucial, but also to make sure that the voices, the creative voices behind the scenes were also being heard, and to give opportunity to people who are not always able to collaborate and have these positions was super important to all of us. So I echo all that was said, and I would just put that little cherry on top.
Absolutely. I mean, just even looking at this virtual conversation right here, just three powerful Black women who brought this together with this team. What is it like to look back on that as also a bit of I don't want to say an accomplishment, because that's really not the word, but as it stands as its own moment in and of itself, is it's actually getting that accomplished, and like you said, making that so much of a priority to have happened.
Yeah, I mean, I pinch myself to think that Kamilah, Susan, Ta-Nehisi, they all trusted me to be the representative to lead this team of staffers that looked like us, that they trusted me to lead the crew that looked like us. I mean, it means so much when we're talking about the destruction of Black bodies in the street, when we were witnessing the pandemic within the pandemic, to then know that Black people who have always showed up despite and in spite of can show up to make such beautiful art that will stay around and stand the test of time. I can't even, like, I just always say, I'm pinching myself to think that I had that moment. It was so beautiful. And I had said to Ta-Nehisi that there will never be another moment like that, where we would create something where everyone would be so intentional about what it is that we were doing, and everyone would, you know, we did this in 16 weeks. That's unheard of. Something so beautiful should have taken at least 2 years. We lived a month a week. And, you know, everyone always brought their best to it because of the work, because of the language, because of the intention and the community and the village that we were trying to create around this work. And so, you know, I just can't say enough about that experience.
Everybody was so fully invested. I think it really meant something to everyone, which is, you know, you're hard pressed to get that sometimes on a set, you know, from the person, you know, doing the gaffer and the you know, sound and camera. It meant just as much to them as the person who was acting it, as, you know, the director, as, you know, it was like, it was such everything felt important, personally important, you know? And so that type of energy, and to look around and see the group of people that we had assembled, that were all, you know, people of color, you know what I'm saying? And mostly Black, you know, you know, people, I don't know, you know, I don't regard that as something that's, you know, undoable or anything like that, because, you know, this is what I've been all my life. So to me, it's like, you know, that those factors, you know, felt kind of like, oh, it's inevitable that one day this will kind of link up. But to see it was a different thing. You know, I remember commenting to Kamilah, like, oh my goodness, look at this, you know, and it wasn't some, you know, hard, difficult thing to assemble this group of extraordinarily talented people who, as Alisa said, brought this to life in 16 weeks, God bless you, Kamilah. God bless
You know, again, I think it's, you know, when you think back on it, it's like, oh my gosh, that really happened. And intentionality has to happen with the art, but it also has to happen in the process and the way of making the art. So those choices of who was on our crew, our team of designers, was all had to be just as intentional as every creative decision that we made that landed on the screen. This was an urgent response. Is an urgent response to make this film. The timeline was a timeline that we put on ourselves very early because we did not want to wait another year to have this conversation that the world was having now. Nina Simone always says, it is the artist's job to be reflective of the times. So in that respect, we had to be urgent, we had to be fast, we had to be efficient, and economical with our choices, our decisions, the way that we produced, how we produced, in order to have a major impact.
and in a way, sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, in a way, the pandemic, you know, was to our advantage in that way. You know, what was, you know, by and large, an extraordinary difficult situation for us all to be in this pandemic, but we leaned into it and said, how can we use this this Zoom world? How do we use this distance to come together? You know, and it enabled us to be in a single day shooting in New York, LA, and Atlanta. You know, setting that up in the schedule, we were enabled to do that. It enabled us to get into spaces and with people because of the limited crew. It enabled us to, you know, kind of get footage quickly and be able to edit as we were going. And we had to have pre-production, production, and post-production at the same time. It all happened at the same time. From the genesis of the idea in June, you know, we started in July and we were done in October or November, was it? October.
Right, November. I remember that delivery date. I was.
Yes, you know, you.
November 9th. That became November 11th. Thank you, HBO, for giving a little more time.
Yeah.
Right, exactly that. But as Kamilah said, we knew that jumping into it, you know, and it just speaks to the extraordinary team that, you know, I have the opportunity to work with on this, is that, you know, we weren't deterred by the limited amount of time we knew we would have, and didn't allow it to overwhelm us in the process. It was sort of, we knew it was going to be part of it, and kind of just jumped into it, knowing what we were up against in terms of time. But again, it was so purposeful that we understood that the limited amount of time would be all we had, but we had to get it in. You know what I mean? It was like,
right
now,
and allow all of that to affect the aesthetics and the storytelling,
yes,
and how we told the story. And,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, on that note, Kamilah, what was that first scene, that first monologue that you conceptualized and then got to film?
So the first day of shooting was Joe Morton, and Joe Morton, we shot at his home. We shot actually several monologues with him. And so what was interesting is that, you know, and you touched on this, Angelique, you know, using a lot of the challenges as creative opportunities. So one of the challenges that, you know, taking people out of their homes and moving them to a film set, like a lot of that was not possible during the time because we were shooting in the month of August. There wasn't a lot of shooting happening in New York City at that time, or even LA for that matter. But people did and were gracious, and with safety and with proper PPE, we were able to go in people's homes, and that brought another level of intimacy and closeness to the work. You know, I think for the actors as well, because what was important and in conception is that, you know, that we saw we saw our performers not as performers, but who they are as people, as citizens, as mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunties, uncles, in their own skin, who were skillful with language because that's their craft, but who were representing themselves as citizens because this is an issue, and therefore blurring the lines. Is this scripted? Is this doc? What bucket does this fit in? I don't know. I love the blurred lines. Uh-oh, we lost Susan. But I'll keep going. I love the blurred lines because I know she's gonna come back because TV magic happens like that. And
how many times did that happen to you while you guys were filming remotely, where you would be in the middle of filming with someone, then all of a sudden they disappeared?
Let me tell you something. There was a day, and we all know. So what was beautiful about technology is that we could all be, even if I was on set with someone physically, you know, I had these ladies, they were on being able to watch the cameras on Zoom. And in some cases I was directing from a Zoom camera. There were days where we were all in the same room. There were days where we couldn't be in the same room. There was a day when we were shooting Wendell Pierce, and Wendell was in Atlanta. And I was shooting from New York. We had just shot Susan. We were with you earlier that day in the park.
Was that same day?
Or the day before,
Yeah.
from the park, but we had the New York Stack Day with Mark Bamuti, Mahershala.
Yeah.
In any case, there was a lot going on.
in LA, yeah.
And Mahershala in LA, and then so anyway, we were shooting Wendell, and you know, this was later in our shoot time when we were shooting Wendell. So there was a rhythm that, you know, with the remote shoots that I was like, oh, we got this down. We're gonna be good. You know, I got the rhythm. Okay, we're day 10 into shooting. This day, for whatever reason, you know, the tech gods were not with us, and you know, he couldn't hear me. The scene between Wendell was actually a scene with him and Michelle Wilson, another actor who was based out of New York, that we had rehearsed via Zoom. We had already shot Michelle's part. So Michelle was feeding into Wendell's ear and he was responding. But somehow that wasn't working. His sound wasn't working. I couldn't hear him. He couldn't hear me. I was on a cell phone talking to the producer, even on the ground, like, but somehow amidst all of that, we figured out a solution and got it done in several takes. And the scene, you know, and I remember, you know, cutting it like, wow, okay, this works. Somehow even the urgency of the fact that we had even less and less time because of all the technical issues we were having that day on set truly fueled this vulnerable rawness in Wendell that just it just really made that scene just soar. And I love watching it. But that day I remember my heart was gonna jump out my mouth.
And I apologize. No, go ahead, Alisa.
I was going to say that day for us started at 5 o'clock, like, you know, so we're talking about a day that starts with in Central Park, and we're at 5 o'clock and we're doing this scene with Mark Bamuti, this great spoken word piece. And then Susan comes over and we're finishing up another piece. At the end of it, she's part of the medley, you know, talking about the community and being Black. And then Kamilah has to go across the street to the Mark Hotel to direct Mahershala, who's waiting in LA, right? And so we rush over to the hotel to do that. And then we're like, okay, the hard parts are done, right? We loaded up the trucks, like everything is out, we're good. Mahershala cried, oh my gosh, that was gold. And now just this, Wendell is sitting in the seat, you know, everybody's ready in Atlanta, and then it drops out. The airwig's not working and I'm dying. I'm texting in the chat, I'm calling Kamilah, you know, it's all of the things. But like Kamilah said, it was just this great, it was the improv. It becomes this different opportunity for us. And, you know, because it was COVID, we didn't have a second chance at anything. Right? There was no second chances. There was no, you're going to do this. And then we go home and watch the dailies and come back and give you notes. You know, these actors were these performers, because they weren't all actors, they were activists, et cetera. But these performers were so generous to allow us, some of them weren't even seeing their family members, to allow us as a crew to come into their lives to do this was so generous of them. And so we had to be respectful of their time and space. And, you know, COVID was a real concern. And so we had to really maximize our time. So when something like that happens, it feels like at the time, like the floor is falling from under you. And then, like Kamilah said, you go back and you look at it and you're like, wow, that was one of the best parts of this film. And you see the ways that you used all the tools in your toolbox to create this tapestry that probably wouldn't have been able to happen had it not been for the conditions under which we were doing it. And we also take all of our Black womanness, right? That thing that we have inside of us that makes us feel like we can do anything. We can take a little and make a lot. And I think it shows in what we put on the screen.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, Kamilah, I interrupted you talking about Joe in that first day of filming.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that first day was it was getting, it was really also something, it was interesting on that first day because it was the first day of filming, but also to give everyone a picture. When we were filming on site with other actors, I mean, you had a crew that was in full PPE. So it almost looked like a toxic waste dump because we're talking like the face guard, the N95, the gown, right? Like everyone, and gloves, right?
The booties.
The booties on your
feet.
Because,
this is early pandemic. This wasn't like, oh, now we not, okay, we sanitizing, we get, just a mask. This was early pandemic. So it was head to toe PPE. Yeah.
We're literally, you're walking over to folks like, and they don't know, people don't know. I don't know who I'm talking to behind these masks and the guards. I'm like, are you Gaffer? Are you Sound? What department are you from? Because I could, so there were barriers that first day you had to kind of get over and kind of get into. And it took a little bit to get into the rhythm, as any first day of shooting does, but especially shooting during this time period, when literally it was hard to breathe or see.
I think that we were one of the first or only to start shooting at that time period. So we were sort of the crash test dummies. They didn't have, there was no such thing as, the COVID department on a set yet. That was sort of being created, and they didn't even know the language to use yet. They didn't know, sort of how to say what we were supposed to do. And, they just, there were just people there to enforce it. And so we had to work that out. It's the normal things that you do and come on set, you can't even pass a bag to somebody else. It had to be put on the floor. You have to step 6 feet back. One of the COVID crew comes in, gets the bag, sanitize it, hands it to the next person. There was this whole thing happening that we just didn't have even a language for or understand yet. And we had to kind of learn that on our feet as well. And also the idea of making sure that the talent felt safe. A lot of people, again, this is early pandemic. We're sort of in the midst of it. New York was at the highest numbers and, in the midst of a deep lockdown. And there were people, as we all were, very concerned about that. And so there was, on top of, trying to create this piece, there was this whole other, world going on how to keep people safe and how to make sure, everybody being tested. I don't know how many times they went up in Kamilah and Alisa.
Every 3 days.
Every other day, and I did a lot of, I was able to see, I think everybody but Joe and one other person, and I was mostly there on Zoom unless I was shooting. But so the idea of everybody being tested and and everybody on the crew being tested and all those things were so brand new, and they're things that now feel like it's been implemented for a while now because it's been going on for almost a year. But it was a lot of newness that we were dealing with. It was being directed and produced in a very new way, and we were discovering it every step of the way while we were doing it.
And it was evolving. And so while we were on set, right? So it wasn't something static, right? While we were doing this, there were times when we were thinking, originally we were thinking we were headed to Atlanta, right? The travel restrictions were changing. There was a time when we were deciding that we were going to DC and Baltimore, and then Baltimore was not an option because they became, New York put it on the do not fly list. And so we couldn't do that. And so when we wanted to do a lot of the the architectural and Baltimore, scenes just to get some of the B-roll of Baltimore. We couldn't do that because we couldn't we thought we were going to go, Kamilah and I, and then we couldn't do that. So we had a team on the ground that did that for us. And, we couldn't travel to LA for reasons that Susan said, that if we went to LA and Oakland, Kamilah and I would have to come back here and quarantine for 14 days. And then we were able at the beginning of this to go to Georgia, and then we weren't. And so, because again, we would have to quarantine for 14 days, and we didn't have 14 days to spend on this. So we had a remote crew in Atlanta. We had a crew in LA, California, and then that drove to Oakland, because there was even some restrictions and changes that was happening because LA and California was starting to spike. And so there was restrictions within California, so they couldn't fly. And so it was ever evolving. I remember 3 weeks before I got the call to do this, sitting on the phone with other PGA producers, trying to figure out, well, what's going, how are they doing? Have you heard of anything? And then next thing you know, I was working with these ladies and the crew to try to figure out how it was going to go. And then we were giving advice to other productions afterward.
Exactly that. Yep. I remember even talking to people on This Is Us and saying like, okay, well, this is what we're doing. I mean, like, I mean, we have to have a crew of like 12, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know how much it's going to help for a crew of 300, but again, we were like one of the first people doing it. I don't know anybody else that was doing that at that time.
I remember finding out that this project was happening and then being like, oh, they're going. Oh, they're almost done. I was like, how did any of this happen in the amount of time that you guys needed to put it together? It's absolutely incredible. And like you said, so much of a testament to innovation and trying new things and working to, again, maintain the safety in those protocols as everything was changing. And Susan, for you as well, you kind of spoke a moment ago about the talent aspect of talent feeling safe. You were playing dual roles in this as well and being talent at a certain point. What was it like being on that set and everyone being in PPE around you as you are performing?
I felt incredibly safe on the set, but, and again, I know what's going on behind the scenes as well. So I knew that we were covered, and I knew that, we were receiving results, and nobody was allowed on the set unless, and I knew that, and our the COVID police on our set were strict. So it wasn't going the COVID police. They were strict, so I knew, it wasn't going down. And look, we were all absolutely on board with them. This, it's not we understood the position that they were in. Again, when something is so new, the position is, let's be as stringent as we can to just prevent any, thing from happening. And that works for me. That works for us. Like, everybody came out safe, which is the blessing of it. Yeah. So, to see that, I think it was more of seeing it from the point of view of like, oh, wow, like, look at what we're doing, and like, oh my gosh, wow, I don't know, that's a good day of work. You know what I mean? That's from the bottom of my heart. That is a good day of work when you can step onto a set like that and know that you're collaborating with people that you have a deep caring for, first of all, and deep respect for, and know that they come from an artistic heart, the same kind of artistic heart that I do. And I knew that being with these ladies. So, I mean, it was just a good day of work for me.
Yeah. Exactly, because beyond the PPE of it all, or beyond the safety of it all, it also, I imagine you also felt the emotional urgency of the project as you were, switching modes from producer to performer in those scenes. What were those scenes like, walking through the park and highlighting Howard's campus? You're in one mind and you're in another, you know what I mean? One brain is like,
okay, how am I going to play with this scene, and how are we going to do this and figure it out, and let's try it this way and that way and this way. Like on Howard's campus, I think we tried it. It got to be about 25 different ways. It was like we just kept going for it, which was awesome. And then the other part of it was, I need to get out. We need to break them for lunch. We need to get, okay, can't we have another shoot right after this, and there's 3 in a row. So I want to make sure that I'm getting through mine so that we can get there and then get back, and so that we can watch this, you know what I mean? So it was those two things going on, but I love that. I kind of like when it's all sparking like that. I enjoy that, because it's all about the work. It's all about this being this piece of art to life, and how can we do that in the best way. So it's when that's the focus, I love that. I love that in any way to like help lift that, whether it's in front or behind. So to do both, at the same time was like, yeah, that was like joyful,
Well, speaking of Howard, I didn't go to Howard, but I do know that it is something that folks who did do love to celebrate, as you should. But this project, of course, centers and celebrates and really features the university for narrative reasons, but also just because, like I said, it should be celebrated. What was it like to be able to really show it off through this project, and the importance to the work of Between the World and Me that Howard University is? Kamilah, I'll start with you on that.
Sure. I mean, I would say this is that, this project literally, would not be here if it wasn't for Howard University, right? I mean, we all went to Howard, myself, Susan, Ta-Nehisi, that's where we met. And you could say started our creative collaboration there. The story centers around our classmate, Prince Jones, who was also a student with us and a friend of ours at Howard. So it was important that we honored his spirit and his legacy. But one thing I think that Howard is and does is that even if you didn't go to Howard, it's a representative of this idea of excellence, this idea of pride, this idea of Black joy, Black excellence, Black pride, right? It is representative of all that, of many different voices of the diaspora, of as a Black person, where you step on the campus and you feel seen. There are other places on our planet where that happens, right? Like there are times when I walk through Brooklyn and I feel that. When I'm at the Apollo or in Harlem and I feel that same opportunity to be seen. So that's why I think that, Howard just being sort of this bastion of excellence and Black culture and people, really it encapsulates that. So it was important, particularly in this story, which is, we were always looking around this tension of pain and joy. And of obviously devastation, but also resiliency. I was very interested in those constant, forces at play with one another at every beat and every turn. And Howard for us was that opportunity of joy, was that opportunity to really deepen in this idea of community and connectivity, of when we needed, the well to be refilled. Ta-Nehisi strategically placed that in the story. He always reminds himself, when I was at the Mecca, when I was at Howard, and just that being just a true space of freedom. And so it was important for that in the book. It was important for us personally, but it was also equally important in the storytelling of the film.
Absolutely. And as we are getting close to the close of this conversation, I wanted to speak to you all about the moment or the performance during filming that you will never forget. Of all of the hours and days that you put into this very, very speedy shoot, when you look back on it, is there a particular just time in filming that really will stay with you about this project, and it encapsulates what this project means to you? And I see you nodding there.
Yeah, there's so many moments where, man. Yeah, well, gosh. Every time I breathe, I think of, that person and that person like that. But I think that there were, you know, I think it's, for me, it's the moment where you see the words and the person kind of meet their crossing. Do you know what I mean? It's where it's like, oh, this, it doesn't look like they're reading a script. Like this is now coming from them, do you know? Which I feel like this piece invites so many people to do, which was one of the things Cam mentioned earlier about the intimacy of it, was how do we make this now so it's just coming out of our mouths and just an extension of ourselves. And I think there were moments when I watched that happen with, to name a few, you know, you saw it happen with Mahershala. Like I remember seeing like that moment where it happened. I remember seeing the moment where it happened with Jarrell, and the moment where it happens with Phylicia and with, you know, Joe. Like everybody has like this moment where you go, yeah, it's just coming from them now. You know what I mean? And that was just the beauty of it. That's what, you know, in my heart. And I think when, you know, from the journey, from the book to the stage to the screen, the heart of it is that these words fit into so many people's mouths. It just feels like, you know, such a universal truth for so many of us, you know? So I loved those moments. I love the moments where I could see, when I saw it with Oprah, you know what I mean? I could see where it just went, you know, oh, this is hers now, you know? So yeah, that's, I mean, I can go down a list. I'm probably going to end up naming 17 people though, so I won't take you.
No. Was there a moment, Alisa, when you remember like looking at those dailies or looking at a performance live and being like, this is going to work. We've done it. This is what we, you know, envisioned in our heads, kind of like Susan was saying.
Well, I want to say that, you know, from the time I knew Kamilah was on this and Susan was on this, and it was Ta-Nehisi's words and Roger Ross Williams, there was never a thought, when I got the call, there was never a thought for me that this wouldn't work, right? So I want to start there. But I will say that there was a point where the first string out came and I said, oh, we've achieved it. Like, I was like, wait, I'm seeing it. This is not only, yeah, I knew it was going to work, but this is so much more beautiful than I could have imagined, right? So that was a moment for me. I think every moment that I got to be on set with Kamilah and, you know, Susan and the talent, every time I was on set, so in New York and DC, I felt that feeling, you know, the collaboration behind the scenes, talking about songs, right? You know, this was supposed to be a diasporic piece, a tapestry of all the things that it means to be a Black person in America and all the ways in which Black people are diverse, right? And so male and female and older and younger and different sexualities. And we had some people, trans people, who were represented as well, and activists and actors, and Ta-Nehisi, who wrote it, a writer who doesn't consider himself a performer at all. And so all of that we achieved. It felt like in all of those moments, the small moments, when we decided to put trap music under Oprah, you know, that was a moment when Oprah came on and talked about the fact that she had never wore a head wrap before doing a performance, right? And then she does this performance, to Susan's point, and we don't get pulled out of the Oprah-ness of it, right? We don't ever, that was the thing. There were such big names, the Angela Bassett, the Mahershala Ali's, the Oprahs, but they were all there. They were giving this performance that transcended who they were and just made you feel like you were looking at people talking about something that in its hurtful moments is unfortunately part of the Black experience, but in its beautiful moments, the joy and the love, you felt like so happy that this was a collective Black experience. And so similar to Susan, I could say the whole process, you know, it's a dream. It's a dream to me. It feels like a dream because it feels like it happened so long ago, but it was also something that I couldn't have even imagined that would be so wonderful. And I remember one of the other things I remember is when the executives at HBO got it, And they said, you know, we knew it was going to be great, but it exceeded so much of our expectations.
Yeah.
And it's that thing. Like even I never thought from the beginning that it wasn't going to be a beautiful work. And then it exceeded everything I could have ever imagined.
Well, that's great to hear. I'll tell you this, in my pit of my stomach, when we got, I mean, listen, the creative process is something, and it is something, and there are times when you are walking through a dark cave, discovering in like a dark forest, hoping for that glimmer of light, right? And I remember, you know, in shooting, and it's great collaborating with people because we feed off of one another and we get that assuredness, like, oh, you see it? Do you see it? Okay, you see it too? Okay, I think this is gonna work. And after shooting, then we get into post. I remember that moment into post, and you know, this is a work that sits in across varying different categories, and quite frankly, in some cases, category lists when I look back on it. I remember talking about this piece early and hearing myself talk, thinking, what? It's part doc, it's part this, and then animation, and then music, and not so I would say that there were so many moments in which that were completely terrifying, but then immediately when those creative breakthroughs happened, when the moments in with visuals with the archival, I remember cutting that scene of Howard, and Susan, yeah, we were all day shooting, and then when we start to cut it in with the archival, like, aha, yes, now I see it. I truly see it now. Now it's going to work. And laying in Jason Moran's music underneath that then just took that scene up to another level. I started to see what I was saying, but really started to see it come together. But one moment where it really clicked in was in the sound mix. And there was a scene that we were cutting in the sound mix. We had a wonderful sound mixer. And this was an opportunity where I got to be in the room with him. And it was a scene which there was a piece of archival footage where a young boy sees his father and is literally in tears running to his father. And he just says, Dad. And he's just in tears because apparently they had been apart for so much long. And we cut that scene for about half a day. And every time we came to that point, Mike, our sound mixer, would just, I could hear him. I was sitting behind him just tearing and sobbing. And at that moment, I was like, we did it.
Mm-hmm.
We did it.
Yeah. And he took out the cherry picker in Susan's scene. That thank you, Mike, because that was killing.
That's right. Cherry picker noise.
Listen, all the producers out there, you know this stuff, like those things that happen that you're just like, Susan gave us this great moment. Susan, my answer to the question that she just asked is always Susan Kelechi Watson's moment in Howard campus. Yeah. But that cherry picker, that was
well, because got him out. It's a walking shot. It is, you guys are tracking her. There's all of this amazing camera work. And then, like you said, there's a cherry picker. And you're like, really? Really?
Yeah, but we got him out. We got him out.
Well, that's what happens when, you know, intersectionality and intentionality and this urgency all kind of come together is the magic. And it feels like the magic is what was made with this beautiful piece of art. And I appreciate you letting us in a bit into your process of getting it made. And I thank you to everyone for watching this conversation and for being a part of this with us. And thank you all for helping the conversation about Between the World and Me, the HBO film, continue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.